some people will make the case it's about the triumph of innocence, except for it's not. It's way, way, way more the original Dracula.
Perversion of innocence.
It's way more the feeding on innocence by darkness and the progressive loss and more and more innocence until you are the darkness.
Well,
Pilot episode loses her virginity to a raider, and by the end, discovers a complete betrayal of her entire worldview.
Yeah,
it's like it all comes crashing down.
If this is victory, who needs defeat?
Okay, and so anyway, and that's all the complete destruction of her family and all sense of nobility, and the fact that there was ever innocence is just removed.
Met a ghost of a king on the road when I first fell. Fire burning to my knees I fell. Met a ghost of a king on the road.
There we go. Recording.
Welcome to Sass.
The change of gears for me is always...
What's the change of gears? What are we changing from?
Changing from our conversation.
Yeah, we're just going to continue. We have our off-camera convo, and now we're going to have our on-camera convo and accidentally say the same things.
It's very informative.
Perfect.
Good. Yes.
Oh, the world is just a basket of rabid kittens right now.
You reach in there expecting love and affection, and you get savaged.
Yeah, you're gonna go insane, and then you're gonna die.
People thought it was the bats, but actually it's the kittens.
It's the rabid kittens. It's the rabid basket.
Yeah.
Of kittens. Okay, what are we talking about?
Well, that fits our conversation topic for today, because I wanted to discuss, post-apocalypse. I actually I had the somewhat distressing experience of reading Leif Anger's new book. I cheerfully refuse.
I have not.
Which came out about a month ago. It's set in post-apocalyptic America, where a bass playing giant of a man named Rainey loses his book selling wife.
Spoiler!
She's murdered by...
She's killed dead.
By some goons who turn out to be agents of Big Pharma.
Ooh.
And then he wanders around. The villain is a guy who apparently hasn't slept in, decades. He, in one key scene toward the end, the bass playing of the main character puts the villain to sleep as they're in prison. And it's that sort of thing. Leif Anger has a lot of luminous characters in his fiction. Like, he'll have a character that's like, this character means something. So in Peace Like a River...
Oh, Leif.
In Peace Like a River, it's the dad, which is, you can get away with one luminous character. But I feel like in every single book, he's just been shoehorning more.
Oh, the luminosity.
Yes. And then the fact that...
slap at the bass.
Yes, just a bass guitar player.
Slap at the bass.
Electric bass. Just grooving, and it's a giant who never does anything. He sails a boat around Lake Superior for most of having rescued this character named Soul, a 9-year-old girl, another luminous character.
You're ruining it.
And I'm just so sad.
The worst part of Peace Like a River was Swede.
Yeah.
The luminosity of Swede was a problem.
Yeah,
but the book is
little
magnificent.
Sister who
it's
writes,
really good.
Yes, one of my favorites.
She writes
one of my top favorite.
Yeah, she writes long form, epic Western ballads.
But what I felt is that some of his belief in good and evil had really disappeared by this one, and instead he'd reduced down to the good of reduced down to the good of like books that you like or communities. It got a huge A+ blurb from Josh Ritter, so our own local,
Josh,
ex-evangelical.
I forgot about Josh. I forgot Josh existed.
And
this is the nature of vast quantities of available music,
right,
via streaming. I would have had a CD and I could have seen, Josh is still a real person,
right?
But I forgot he existed. There's actually a couple tracks I should play again, but nothing recent. There's some
his old stuff.
There's some old stuff that's good.
Because he left Idaho behind and moved to New York.
Josh.
And now he's blurbing
Leaf.
what I would have said is one of my favorite living Christian authors. But I don't know, when you've had two stinkers in a row, when you start with an A and then drop to a B and then get 2 Fs, I don't know if it gets to be your favorite Christian author anymore. If we're going through Leif's oeuvre.
Oeuvre.
His oeuvre.
It's pronounced oeuvre.
Right.
Oeuvre.
Denis Villeneuve. That's what we just started. We just get in our French mode. Anyways, I was going to bring that up because it reminded me too that I've been hearing a lot of chatter about the Fallout show, speaking of post-apocalypse, and I was curious.
Heavy sigh.
That's all it was?
Heavy sigh.
Is that just because it's based on a video game?
Yeah, totally and entirely. No.
Is that just because it's Amazon Prime?
Probably. I think it's because it decides to suck really hard.
Wow.
I think that's the biggest issue.
You think that's an active decision, or do you just kind of?
This was an active decision. They would not have thought it was sucking, but they chose it on purpose. And they knew that it was contra grain and everything else. I think that, so the biggest issue of Fallout, the world Fallout, is what works for a video game structurally does not necessarily work logically for linear narrative. And that actually goes from here to there and doesn't go into many side deaths and try again. And, it's like all the choose your own adventure-ness of a video game. The base concept that they decide to milk is you have this vault-dwelling, wide-eyed, brilliantly cast, wide-eyed girl. Her very pristine, deeply innocent alt 1950s vault is invaded. Her father's abducted. And she decides to go rescue him. Now, this is where the logic of the video game starts being followed, and it's just horrendous. There is no logical reason whatsoever in any way, in any world, for raiders from the outside to invade a vault that's crowded with food and resources, leave anyone alive, but instead just kidnap one old man.
Yeah.
It's like, it makes no sense. They try to explain that at the end of the season.
Sure.
They're like, oh, by the way, this is why that made sense. And it's like, no, that's not actually how plot drive, can work. What they do is they play with this, with the device of like think of it as dropping like blood in water, really clean water or muck, and watching that shocking moment of the muck, the ink, the blood diffusing into this pure water and just the taint of it.
Yeah.
And so you have this really pure, virginal character, like literal virgin.
Yeah.
In the pilot, she's going to lose her virginity to a raider. And, it's like her virginity is taken in the pilot and is taken in every episode thereafter in other ways.
Okay.
And that's the device.
It's thematic. It's
just the device is here's innocence. And what we're going to do is we're going to shock it even harder.
Yeah.
We're going to shock her in episode 1. We're going to shock her even more in episode 2. Then guess what? We have an idea for episode 3. We're going to shock her harder. And then she's traveling with this guy who's this wise man who's kind of, explaining the world. Oh, but then she has to decapitate him and travel with his head and just travel carrying a human head. And then she has to make jerky out of the ass of an immortal ghoul. And it's like, oh, what? Human flesh. She's cutting human flesh out of this like radioactive mutant. And she's going to make beef jerky out of his butt. And it's like, and it's just.
It sounds like something that a junior high kid would think is a good idea.
Yeah, it's a video game.
Right.
And it's like, and it's just, and guess what? We have even now she's demanding sex from this stranger she's traveling with. And she's just like.
So she's fully entered the world and
she's
become
just
another.
Yeah.
A boss of it. She's
and then
on
guess
her
what?
pathway
And then
to
it
become a
turns
boss.
out not only, and I'm spoiling this and I don't care because spoilers only bother wusses.
We'll have to get into that because I think we spoiled. I cheerfully refuse, as many people care about that. I think more are going to care about Fallout.
Yeah. So if I can help you not watch it, I'm fine. I'm fine. So the pilot episode is very creative, very striking, very interesting, sets up this world. But then, and I was on some flights probably back from New York or wherever I was going, and it was just like, okay, I hop, especially the middle episodes of a season, or where they're trying to prolong Act 2, and you can kind of
skip your way through,
like moving. There's so much you can watch an episode 5 of a 10 episode series. You can watch 40 minutes and 10 minutes. It's not hard to, just kind of move through. By the end, when they're trying to resolve, you kind of have to pay attention again. But I kind of booked it through this season, and the layers of the shock and destruction of her innocence until we finally get to the end, and the big old twist, the big old discovery is there was never any innocence. Like,
so the vaults themselves are compromised.
It's like, there's just, it turns out not only have we just shocked it, and we tried to go from loss of virginity to she's killing people to just really intense, over the top video game gore. We're moving to cannibalism. We're moving into hypersexuality. We're just, we're moving down the line with her thread. There's other threads as well.
Right.
But we're just trying to shock her, and more so. And then we're also going to try to make the chief villain more relatable and more
Is that the
understandable.
skeleton face guy?
The ghoul, yeah.
Okay.
And so he has this backstory, and it's understandable, and he's on this noble quest. That's what he's actually doing.
So it's sort of the reverse. You're then trying to take take
exactly.
the innocent and make them dirty, take the dirty and make them understandable.
And just opposite starting points, opposite destinations intersecting along the way, and the ultimate discovery that there is no innocence in the world anywhere. This happens also for.
So is that sort of like, are we going back to Thucydides? The weak suffer what they must, the strong do what they will. Is that sort of
what we're doing?
Only thing you can reduce to?
So the thing that matters here, and this is, I don't want to give it too much credit. It's a video game, and they decided to keep the video game logic, which it turns out has no logic. I think I've talked before about throwing Ayn Rand across the room.
Yeah.
Reading The Fountainhead till I was like 50 pages to the end and being like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
You're smashing your puppets now. Your characters have no freedom. I'm throwing this across the room. The logic of this world, as they try to explain their anti-capitalist agenda. It makes no sense. And it was projected onto it in video game design. And you could just say this was it. You can just say it, and gamers accept it because it's still zombies and we're going through wilderness and we're shooting people. But in terms of actually explaining what happened and how it happened and who was motivated to do what, and believable villains who are causing nuclear apocalypse, they have nothing. It's all just completely arbitrary, propagandistic nonsense.
Sure. Okay. So the bad guy in the Leaf book is also capitalist. They are now called astronauts, and they're big pharma, and they're basically creating medicine, including suicide pills that everybody gets. But
so imagine, if you will, if nuclear holocaust was somehow really good for business.
that is an imagination that's tough to make.
And living in a vault for 200 years is your business plan.
And you're going to get filthy rich and take advantage of everybody
on the other side somehow. After 200 years, you have 200 years of patience.
Okay.
It's like
that. Okay. You're right. That's the kind of thing you put in a video game.
It's a video game.
You don't think about it.
It's a video game.
It was in the cutscene, and you just go shoot some more guys.
But mostly there's also the intense video game logic of just, I'm blowing heads off. I'm severing limbs, but also things heal really quickly. You can reattach a necrotic dead man's finger to your hand after your finger is lost. There's just all this like weird, shocking, rotten decay, and my foot's off. Don't worry, it's back on. I can super heal really fast. It's very video game, and like, I've been stabbed. And it's like, but here's a heal thing. Boop, 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 boop. I'm repowered, and now I can continue on. So it's the mechanism of video game play in narrative, which just doesn't work.
Right.
anywhere near as well.
Right.
Now, I think they still could have, after the pilot, they still could have delivered a pretty great season. But Jonathan Nolan just did his thing. And it went with this very, very irrational.
Yeah. Well, this is the fun part. This is the fun part of the pod. How do we, what could they have done? I mean, I assume once you have you're saying grant the lost innocence in episode 1, grant her coming out, a virgin on a mission. What do you do at that point?
I was actually just on before this, I was on a long Zoom call with a TV executive who worked with Amblin for decades and did a lot of Spielberg stuff. And we were talking all this stuff. We were actually talking about Fallout and a lot of other series and what are the things that work and why and so on. And one of the things that she said that I thought was really observant, and I won't name drop her because she might not want to be in the podcast, but
What? I thought this is so good for capitalism.
Yeah. But so I would give her credit for this, but instead she just know it wasn't me. One of the things she said is the problem with big IP is that you don't have the freedom to really execute. You're chained to this IP. And so when you're chained to IP, you either are going to betray the fans of that IP.
Yeah.
Like you start with betrayal because you've modified and improved it, hopefully, or you're going to be inevitably predictable and follow the blueprints correctly.
Right.
And if you follow the blueprints correctly, then you're just chained to what was. And so I have not played Fallout. I've not spent a lot of time in Fallout, but it had that vibe where I'm like, those between levels in a video game when it shows you the little narrative connectors,
the cutscenes
and the explanations and the villains confess things and, it's all there. It felt that way. Like, okay, you're taking the logic of a world that was incredibly contrived for very specific video gameplay reasons, and you're trying to make it work in long form storytelling. And if you go away from it, then why did you pay for this IP?
Okay.
Why did you pay all this money for this video game if you're not going to use their nuclear holocaust backstory? If you're going to fundamentally change it, if it's not all the capitalists, if it's, and it's all this like alt history parable about America and defense spending and,
it's
the
military
it's all this
industrial
stuff.
complex.
And it's, it's back in an alternate mid 20th century in which a nuclear holocaust actually happens because the capitalists got their way and that's what they wanted. So it's that. And they keep all that logic. And so what she was saying about when you buy IP, if you buy a video game, if you buy a TV show for a film or buy a film for TV, whatever it is you do, it's extremely difficult in that situation because you're either becoming very predictable and you're tied to the mechanisms and logic and narrative architecture of that intellectual property.
Superman.
And so you're wildly predictable.
Right. The Superman movie, I guess, would be an example.
Or you subvert it and you do something else, in which case, why did you pay for it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why are you, why are you doing that?
It's kind of she thinks it's a little bit of a lose-lose.
Yeah.
Obviously, you get the huge marketing exposure of being connected to the Marvel universe.
You got this big brand launch, but it's tough. Now, if you buy like Shogun and it's older and it's lost.
And nobody cares if you stick to the 1,000 pages of the original source material.
Even Dune.
Sure.
So they kind of have followed it, but it's when you play with it, it's like it's always a conversation with viewers. It's always a conversation with fans. What did you change? Why did you change it? Oh, why did you go away from it? Lord of the Rings, if the books didn't exist, I might even enjoy the movies.
Yeah.
It's like just by themselves, I might enjoy them.
Yeah.
But because the books exist, I'm like, what the heck? Why did you cheapen this moment, or why did you miss this character? And that's just the downside of working with big IP. So anyway, that's what she said. I found it really interesting. And I think that Fallout, all of the weaknesses are those ways in which it feels like the video game. And I would say, since I'm not super familiar with the video game, like a video game. All the ways in which it feels like a video game are
So
the ways in
really,
which it's
really episodic.
cartoony, hyper violent.
Yeah, no memory whatsoever of what happened. Yeah.
Legs off, legs on.
Right.
Virginal characters carrying around human heads and making, in the words of the ghoul, ass jerky. This sweetheart, he's giving her a knife and be like, make the jerky, and she's got to go cannibalize.
Nice.
And of course, the evil dude is the one who's right. When she says her parents,
protected me
in the vault, they would never. I would rather die than be a cannibal. My dad, yada yada, this, that, the other thing, all the nobility, all the innocence, and he says, well, there's always what people said they did, and then there's what people actually did when they were surviving, and it's this jaded. Everyone's a ghoul.
Gotcha.
And she's becoming one, and he is unbecoming one, but it's not because he's becoming less of a ghoul now. We're just peeling the onion, discovering his narrative in reverse.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just taking him back.
And as we find motivation,
we're taking him back towards innocence.
The audience is like,
so we're taking him back towards innocence, and while we're taking her forward. And the other way in which it feels like a video game is the way in which it hypersexualizes her. And which is so much a play for the gamer world.
Right.
The hypersexualization of a female character.
Yeah.
Especially one who's innocent, big, doe-eyed.
Right.
It's just, so that's unfortunate. The gratuitous cartoony violence is unfortunate. And then of course the just catastrophic architectural illogic.
So take
the ghoul is a very likable character though, and brilliantly played. Casting is great. The world build is great. I showed my kids the pilot. It's like, because I wanted them to know, this is what's going on right now. I filtered it. Here's the pilot. And we watched it, and everybody was kind of like, okay, like that was a video game. If I tell them, no, it goes in a satisfying and, cathartic direction, they would all watch more. But when I tell them, oh, if you buy in, this is going to really let you down. Like if we filter it and watch more and more, I would be taking out in filtration more and more of her loss of innocence, which is, kind of just undermines the whole project.
So I guess this, in that sense, the project really is to take an audience with an expectation for nobility and to debase it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Not even nobility, innocence. Naivete, innocence.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I don't know if that's an intentional thing to do to the audience, or is it just,
it's totally intentional.
In one sense, that's sort of coming of age, right? I mean, it's like, that's how some folks view coming of age. Like the idea that you start not knowing things are bad. And you're going to grow.
It's way, way, way more the original Dracula.
Perversion of innocence.
It's way more the feeding on innocence by darkness, and the progressive loss and more and more innocence until you are the darkness. Now, because of the hypersexualization, what happens in Fallout is that they're trying to have it both ways. So because they want to keep her in and this is very, very much this type of game trope, but because they want her to stay a hottie who is desired and could be on posters in gamers' bedrooms, they want her to be that. They can't have her totally become a vampire. They can't have her decay all the way
and lose her nose.
Yeah, exactly. They can't have that nose cavity. They need to decay her to have these repeated instances of shock and loss of innocence, but then somehow she resets and she looks the same and has the same big eyes and is, just kind of innocently going through. Now, I know that there's people who would argue the opposite, who would argue the preservation of innocence because she keeps winning. It's like she keeps spin kicking and surviving, and she should be this little wilting violet who is devoured. And the debate of the series comes very early when people are talking about how quickly she'll get eaten alive on the surface. And yet she with big doe eyes is casually and happily and cheerfully carrying around a human head.
Right.
Well, unflinchingly.
Yeah.
She's very, actually not very reactive. She has these little moments of shock and she continues to win. And so some people will make the case it's about the triumph of innocence, except for it's not.
Well, yeah. It
Pilot episode loses her virginity to a raider. And by the end, discovers a complete betrayal of her entire worldview.
Yeah.
It's like, it all comes crashing
If
down.
this is victory, who needs defeat? Okay.
And so anyway, and that's all the complete destruction of her family and all sense of nobility, and the fact that there was ever innocence is just removed.
But she has become a fitting denizen of the world.
She's escaped the Matrix.
Yeah.
And she is out there in the real, very, very Matrix. And if you think about
Right.
the real world, it's all shiny. The Matrix world, it's whatever you want. You can be super cool. But you go to the real world and it's just desolation.
It's gross and everyone has shaved heads.
Yeah, it's that. Okay. So it's
kind of a serpentine promise, if we're not to get too biblical on it, but that if you're going to get this little bit of truth and it's going to wreck everything. Like a little bit of truth mixed with the falsity.
Yeah. And even there, if the knowledge of good and evil as something that is destructive is still something that we struggle with.
Yeah.
People think they have a right to know something because it's true. And yet it can really harm you. You can not be up for that. It's like saying, I'm allowed to touch fire if it's real. It's like, ooh. It's some of this will really, really, really destroy you. Some of this you should not look upon. You can be aware of, but you don't need to stare at it. You don't need to study it. But there are people who are called to, pastors, doctors. There's others, but there's things that we just don't need to see and ought not to because it would harm us.
Yeah.
And they can be true. They can be good. They can be evil.
Right.
And so and this is tough for Christians to comprehend, but the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil are both destructive. And there are good things that, we're not to know. And we don't need to know. And we understand there's a ton of evil things we're not to know, but we don't really get that about the good as much.
I guess I haven't thought that except for, when you get into thinking about justice, that's one where you start to realize, oh yeah, I couldn't do this. Like I cannot be God.
Yeah,
God is the one who's going to break up good and evil. And he's gonna be the one who justifies how this is good. And if I get into this mode of I have to justify this, I have to weigh, I have to parse, that's a path toward bad stuff.
It's also I actually think that there's a recent reaction into video games. The Last of Us was also extremely successful as a show. Also dystopic, post-apocalyptic. But video games have immersive worlds. And we've talked about this before in terms of what do people want to watch and how do they want to experience it. A real deep immersion into the other and to really feel some crazy experience vicariously is a potent thing. Yeah. Whether it's The Quiet Place or The Last of Us or even Fallout in a more cartoony way. But the downsides are that it doesn't have a holistic worldview or have a true vision of the future, a vision of truth and goodness at all. It has like a mission and then various jaded arcs. And, I've said this before, that one of the reasons why I wanted to write middle grade, I wanted to write younger novels is because I got to have concrete, satisfying endings.
Yeah. You don't have to bleed off into, you've grown up, the world stinks.
It all sucks. And you thought you were saving the world and you went on this journey and you failed. Yeah. And it was all lies, but at least you made it to Denver.
Yeah.
It's like,
right. Well, the most satisfying post-apocalyptic or the best writers, they all do that. They're all very negative things. From 1984 up to like Orcs and Crake and the other Margaret Atwood stuff, like where she's most potent is when she's really, really at her most atheist.
Yeah, it's also interesting because we're so simple in our subversion. And so if you have a character go into a world that seems great, guess what you're going to find out?
That the world is not great.
It's not great.
I got it.
You get into the colony and you're like, oh, I'm finally safe from the zombie apocalypse. And the men are all wearing ties and their shirts are ironed and the lawns are pristine.
Yeah.
The women are wearing aprons.
Right.
What are you going to find out?
Yeah. That there's a dark
They're
secret.
cannibals.
Right.
It's like, it's going to go full psycho. And every single time it's going to do that. Or alternatively, if you come upon a little colony and there's an argument, there's a debate, there's this struggle, and they're all good. It's a great place. But some of them want to throw you out and they want to kill you or they want to exile you because you're going to taint and destroy. But your friends and your allies advocate for you and they save your life. What's going to happen?
Sorry.
You will be their total destruction.
Oh, sure. Yeah. You're going to ruin it.
You'll come in and we'll all be ruined. It'll all be totally destroyed by your touch.
Right.
It's like there's just these different mechanisms.
Well, yeah, the most Christian characters that in this fourth book of Leaf Anger is the ones who evangelize these pagans, but by evangelizing, they lynch them. So they bring them back and lynch them. And that was at the point where I was like, okay.
Oh, do they?
I was like,
no.
What is going on here?
So it'd be kind of fun to take a group, a motorcycle gang or pirates, and they look awful. They look terrible. And it's not just that they, underneath their crusty, awful exterior, they have a heart of gold, but they're actually good and righteous. It'd be really funny to do.
Yeah, they're actually good.
That direction. They're actually noble. They actually love the true, the good, and the beautiful, and they're holding on to it. And you could pull that off in some the British Imperial period because they were being so evil in the way they were shanghaiing men for the Navy, for the fleet. They could just kidnap you.
Gangs, yeah.
And if you escaped, you were, there's capital punishment for just not being shanghaied. For
refusing to be kidnapped, yeah.
And so, I just told my son that if I was alive at the time, I would be a pirate. Because alternatively, you're going to be abducted and, pressed into the British Navy, and I would be swimming overboard to the other place with better health care. And the problem is you get over there and it's kind of like conservatism at the moment where the whole no enemies to the right thing, where you get over there to the pirates and you're like, whew, I escaped the British Navy. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is horrible over here. This is absolutely awful.
Best metaphor so far.
But it's like, okay, here I am on the island of Tortuga among my fellow mutineers and escapees, and
the swine.
We're all pirates. We're all supposed to be hung equally. We'll be hung. And so some of them are like, well, we may as well be killers,
Right. Wasn't that kind of Robin Hood?
A little, yeah. But Robin Hood plays it more noble. He's a strong enough character. So it is very Robin Hood.
Yeah.
But what you need is them to look scary. You actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's a question. Did Mad Max do that right? Right. Where he is, you have two groups of these outlaws.
Are we talking Fury Road or are you talking the original?
I was talking the original, but okay. I guess kind of.
I'm not familiar enough with Mel's.
I know it's been too long since I watched it, but I guess Fury Road, I guess he's inside the system still trying to escape it.
Yeah.
He's not. You're saying, how can we have them in this parallel sort of bad economy actually be good?
Yeah. Can we really ever successfully have somebody flee and not discover via Footloose or via the loss of innocence?
Right. Stepford Wives.
That to be jaded, to be rough, to be brutal is good.
Yeah.
But to discover that David's men in the wilderness are actually good.
Yeah.
They're not just like, oh, peel it, and we're going to find out that they're bad.
Right.
And bad is good. We're not going to like flip good and evil, but we're actually going to find them out there, out on the outside.
And they're good.
That would be really fun to do. The noble pirate.
I mean, it does make me think that we really stink at coming of age stories, and the buildings Roman. For us, it does mean that. Like the novels have really contributed to the idea that coming of age means loss of innocence.
Yeah.
And understanding that everything you thought was good is
I'm talking
tainted.
John Hughes movies, but we're going all the way back to Byron and Bram Stoker. And, it's like coming of age and basically everything that Jane Austen was writing amongst, the coming of age was this brutal experience. Even like Devil Wears Prada is this way. Like it's we take this little fresh-faced person and we just
in her
run
ugly
them
sweaters, and she's gonna just
and we just
destroyed.
run them through this grinder, and over and over and over again we do that. So anyway, I don't know why, other than we like to smash things.
Could it be because we are depraved?
There's a possibility.
I mean, we're Calvinists, so we're not arguing that stories are not depraved, but
let's think about all of us, every single one of us, everybody listening, you, Brian, myself. You're walking through some, overgrown lane, and you come to a house that's clearly abandoned. It's empty, doors open, vines growing inside.
Mm-hmm.
In the front, there's a huge plate glass window that's intact. And there are rocks at your feet. I mean, like,
yeah.
What do we all feel right there?
Man, it would be almost impossible.
It'd be so hard not to smash that window.
Especially if the house looked pretty bad.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like,
if it looked okay, I think I could maybe hold it together. But if the house looked pretty bad.
But that urge.
Right.
That urge to see something shatter.
Yeah.
That urge to kick something over.
Right.
To be entropy and to be destructive is deeply ingrained. And I do think it is connected to depravity and the fall of man. To be part of the process of decay and death in things. I think it
makes it sound so bad.
But actually right there, I don't think it's actually horrible to throw a rock through it.
No.
Like I've set it up already. It's not an immoral thing, right?
Right.
But it's like, that just seems so fun.
Right.
Right. And I think that base entropy instinct is something that we like to do. When somebody spits out of a Christian school the pristine valedictorian, the expectation of the narrative is that they will go be devoured. The expectation is that they will go become jaded and transformed. The window will smash,
right,
and they'll go through.
Because if you jump back to the early stories that were rags to riches stories, there is something that's kind of fake about those too.
Yeah.
Like the Horatio Alger. Like, my grandpa growing up in the, 30s, 40s,
the bootstrap gospels. Yeah.
Right. That's what he read, and that's what he liked as fiction, and gave me some of his copies from back then. And they're just, everything goes right. They have the opportunity to steal the money and they don't. So they get the inheritance,
yep,
that kind of thing. And God does tell those stories. Faithful with little, you'll be faithful with much.
100%.
But it is interesting that we flip back, and I don't actually have a desire to read more Horatio Alger.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on right there, but that feels more fake, I guess. Maybe that is something that's broken about us, because that feels more fake to me than the coming of age story where you learn.
Well, in terms of fake, entropy is the norm, right?
Yeah.
Decay is the norm. And so if you're talking about what is real, as in what happens the most,
sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's decay.
Yeah.
It's, it's crumbling. It's there's less, there are always fewer people who are the outliers of success, who really battle and get there. The Pursuit of Happiness movie, the Will Smith movie. There are fewer instances of that. Now, if you remember, you've seen that one, right?
Sorry, which one?
Pursuit of Happiness.
Oh, yeah, but I think it's been
So Will Smith, dad, spoilers everywhere, single dad, ends up homeless. Like he and his son are like sleeping in public restrooms.
I didn't watch this.
It's a true story. And this guy's really smart, but he's all the way, he's all the way down and out. He's a machine salesman, equipment salesman. It's just awful, 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 awful.
Mm-hmm.
Ends up without his wife and so on. He wants to be a trader. He wants to be a day trader. He thinks he could do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually is just aggressively pursuing spit bathed in public restrooms as a homeless guy, putting on his suit, going in to try to get stockbroker jobs, and just going after and aggressively, just unrelenting, won't quit, keeps going. And one of the things I love about the film is that the tipping point for him is he jumps in the back of somebody's car with them, trying to pitch himself. And the guy is, totally off put into what's going on with this guy. Doesn't want to be in the car with him, but they're driving somewhere. And the thing that tips it all is that Will Smith's character is bothered that the guy has a Rubik's Cube and is messing around with it and can't figure it out and is just kind of distracted, not paying attention. So he takes it from him. And while he's talking to the guy, he solves the Rubik's Cube really quickly and gives it back to him. And it's this really aggressive, pungent person jumps in the back seat with this guy trying to get a job, has no prayer of getting the job, but then very quickly solves a Rubik's Cube, just because it's annoying him, really.
Yeah.
And gets a shot. Like it then gets and everything goes from there. They are those small moments that do tip things. And those happen over and over and over again. So it is interesting. That's a fun story, but we tell far more stories about, and this is very common, about that loss of innocence into destruction. And then we also frequently love to have somebody pop out the back of destruction, wholly intact and totally fine.
Yeah.
And just walking away from it like, oh, I learned my lesson and I'm going to go be perfect. I am untainted by this thing. That's more Devil Wears Prada. I get ground up and then I pop out the backside and I'm going to be just fine. I'm great.
Right.
Yeah. As if none of that stuck to me.
Yeah.
None of that damage comes with me. And that's just not the case. So we do tell the descent of innocence into chaos.
I see.
And then out the other side, we try to benedict it and just defy natural law. There's no repentance. There's no redemption. There's just, I'm better now. But we also do the Moulin Rouge story where it's innocence descending into hell. And then I never escape hell. I'm just there now. We do that one too. So anyway, apocalyptic stories, which I like.
Yeah.
And
we're
so
about to assign one.
And so does
as your
America.
next
America
link.
likes them too.
Yeah.
Children of Men.
Yeah. Our next look at Moving Pictures Club.
We've talked about it before, but we're actually going to do it. We're going to do it right.
We'll pull up some scenes.
Children of Men, a great apocalyptic film. And based on a book by P.D. James. And I will say, which I probably said before, one of the rare instances where the film is better than the book. Not in every way, but
I'm going to read the book in preparation for this.
Not in every way, but in some ways. So, Children of Men, another apocalyptic story. But why do you think it is, Brian, that apocalyptic and dystopian just sticks with us as a genre?
I mean, I think we're anxious. I think we're an anxious people, and there's a sense in which there are life cycles. We've talked about this, and a lot of people are worried about the future, and I think that transfers into literature. If we're talking about primal urges, that's one of our primal urges right now. Is the future is not rosy. The future is.
A friend of mine just told me that he's going to focus on the summer. He's going to focus on preparing his family for the future, and I was like, oh. So are you doing like survival techniques or like
knife fighting?
Yeah. What are you field dressing animals? Like, what is it? He's like, no, we're doing tutorials on AI.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, so like the field dressing is going to come on the other side of that. So you're talking, I think what I said is like the short-term future then.
Yeah.
We're talking about the short-term future is the world of AI. And then
he's excited about the drone swarms.
You're talking about right now. Yeah. You're not talking about on the other side when we all have to milk our own chickens.
That's funny.
So I don't know. You're right that we are anxious, but I think dystopian, post-apocalyptic stuff is, in some ways, I think it's the opportunity to tell truly primal stories without all the artifice and structure of the world we've built.
Can I change my answer?
Sure.
My answer is actually that we're too happy now.
Okay.
We're in a place where we have a lot of what we want. And I think you're right. We try to go the other direction. I was just thinking back to some of the early novels that are being written, when they're talking about what does a utopia actually look like, that's because their everyday lives were much more like our novels are trying to get us to be. So that's what I think. I think we're so blessed where we are right now that when we move to Storyland, we can go two different directions. But the post-apocalyptic feels so much further from our everyday life than it ever has in history. Then that's my answer.
I think that's a good one. That's a good answer. I think it's a variation on just reducing you as a father to the most fundamental demands of fatherhood. And everybody else, like all the relationships just get distilled down, all the way. Where a lot of people are, if you, in order to be a good dad, you have to have 401ks. You have to have, all this art, all this artifice, all this structure of our society, as opposed to just, can you keep them safe though?
Yeah.
Like, can you protect yours? Can you protect yours? And just boiling it down to just the basics. I think that's really appealing.
I think you're right.
As a thought experiment, in terms of like a touristic experience in narrative.
So you're saying Fallout is the story of Innocence being corrupted. The Road is the story of him protecting Innocence all the way through. Like the dad protects the son.
Can you do it?
Can I do it all the way through? And there's bleakness, but that protection or preservation of his child makes it.
Yeah. Can you keep the light? Can you keep the fire lit?
Yeah.
At all. I actually, last week or so, I had an idea for an apocalyptic show, post-apocalyptic show. And it's barely an idea, not like a real one, just like the little seed. This is the kind of thing that could turn into a whole show pitch. But it was courtesy of my manager. And I texted her about something in the news. I was like, hey, have you seen this? And she said, if there was an alien invasion, I would be at the Home Depot trying to finish my renovation. Like she has no time for any news or anything else. She's just trying to finish her bathroom. And I thought, that is genius. That would actually be really funny. Not the alien invasion, but some woman, specifically, I was like an influencer, like a Renault influencer, where there's been a total apocalypse, but the desperation to keep followers and to not just go to the Home Depot in search of grout in the apocalypse, but also to film yourself doing it and to be time lapse in it. And
I see. Okay.
And like trying to be an influencer in the apocalypse would be amazing. I was like, I might call it no likey, but it's like somebody just trying to post, it's like there might be one other person who's also doing remodels and just trying to build. But I liked it because I was like, the germ here is in total decay, someone trying to build, like trying to build and pursue something instead of just survival, but like actually construct something and make a beautiful bathroom in the apocalypse.
Is that I know you haven't thought this out, but is that something bad about her? Or is
something
it actually
funny.
Something human? Yeah, it's human.
It's something broken, but also wonderful.
Right.
So anyway, that one I was like, there's a story there to figure out. I don't know.
I mean, it's no different than our desire to build sandcastles on the beach, I think.
Yeah. So, but like the idea of it having all totally gone.
Right.
And somebody's
She's
up at
still
2
there.
a.m. Somebody's up at 2 a.m. like doing her tile.
Yeah.
Like I really like that. I like that a lot. Anyway, it's not a story yet. It's just like it's images and scenes.
It's the kernel.
All because my manager texted me that she'd be at the Home Depot. And that gave me a great scene too. I'm like, oh man.
Right.
Somebody who's not trying to loot anything anybody else is trying to loot. You're just
right.
You're back in the stock room. Just
you're trying to compare the grout colors.
Color matching. Yeah. Like it'd be pretty funny. Anyway, Lamp is Children of Men. If you've seen it before, watch it again.
There you go.
Watch it again. I'm sure filters are available for it.
I think so.
I will say this though, there's, depending on who's in the room, there's a graphic birth scene that is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually think it's an example of a great thing to have in a film. And so while filters are to be desired if you have kids and you're going to watch this with kids, I don't have a problem with the birth scene in Children of Men. And so we can talk about that on the podcast as well.
I think some language and a little bit of marijuana,
some nudity,
yep,
related to pregnancy and birth. But it's a It's a really, really fantastic, fantastic film. So that's the spoiler. The spoiler is
It's fantastic.
I like it. I like this one a lot.
And it actually really does. It really is a lot of the themes that we've been talking about. Preservation of innocence, the idea.
No, exactly. It's almost like we planned it, Brian. I say that so facetiously because we planned nothing.
Here we are.
Brian planned stuff, but we planned nothing.
The royal we.
Yes.
Yep.
This has been SASP. We'll see you next week. When are we going to talk about this? How much time are we going to give him?
I mean, I think we should talk about it next week.
It's summertime. It's after Memorial Day. Get it watched, people.
Right.
We've waited for months to give you a pick, so let's be all in a rush now.
Right. Let's go.
It's like lawyers. There's a lawyer in my life, unfortunately, who's like, takes months to get back to me.
And then needs
and it's like, I need this signed today. I need this signed tomorrow. Can you read these 50 pages?
This is not reciprocity.
Where's the equity?
All right.
Peace.
Imagine the well-read man. Do you see a machine dressed in tweed, gorging on information? This book is not about becoming that kind of reader. The well-read man wakes up and consults with Moses on his way to work.
And God spake all these words, saying, I am the Lord thy God, which hath brought thee out of the land.
He sips his coffee and ponders the wisdom of Hannibal's elephants crossing the Alps. He turns furrow-browed philosophers upside down and takes their lunch money. He changes his oil and deliberates with Peter Drucker about effective management practices. He regales his wife with a tale of Monet's water lilies in the gardens at Giverny. He sings with Sandra Boynton as his toddler's eyes grow heavy. This book is about becoming that man. Be as human as you can be. Learn how to read a book.